In the build-up to the launch of Pokemon Legends ZA, the online reception of the game had me thinking, how does Game Freak keep getting things wrong? And when the game launched, I wasn't really able to play for a couple of days, but the swaths of criticism never went away, which made me pretty curious. I bought the game because, let's be real, I grew up with Pokemon. I enjoy the format, and my expectations have never been anything crazy. But after playing through ZA and completing the entire game along with the Pokedex, putting about 40 hours into it, the one thought in my mind is, how does Pokemon, and by association, Game Freak, continue to fail? I promise I'm going to talk about the actual game, because despite a lot of the negativity, I do think there are a decent amount of high points about this game, but we need to be fair, and honestly, sometimes we just gotta call a spade, and I'm going to start by talking economics and business first. Timestamps are provided, so you can always skip to whatever you want to hear about. The one major thing to really look at is actually the success of Pokemon, because I think this is what truly influences development. I could go on and on about marketing strategies, revenue, and business plans, but the fact of the matter for a major company is always, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. As of last Thursday, a week since launch, Pokemon Legends ZA has sold nearly 6 million copies total, pretty much evenly split between the Switch 2 and the regular Switch. The Switch 2 also saw a major surge in sales in Japan for the release of ZA, noting that the reception of this game was highly anticipated and it sold very well. Let's do a bit of math to put things into perspective. And don't worry, I'll keep it simple. Due to an online leak, we know that the development budgets of ZA was around 12 to 13 million US dollars. For some comparisons, one of the most expensive games to develop in history was Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, and that one was at a whopping $700 million of budget. Cyberpunk 2077 is more of a middle ground one, but still pretty high at $440 million. Final Fantasy VII's original launch in 1997 had a $140 million cost between both development and marketing. The fact of the matter is, games are expensive to develop, and yet Pokemon continues to have minuscule budgets despite it being the largest media franchise in the history of this planet. But they keep getting away with this. To keep math simple, let's say the game is $60, and I'm gonna undercut slightly. They have sold 6 million copies at $60 each, and so the total amount of money made on sales is $360 million. It's more than that because the Switch 2 version is $10 extra, but that is a massive profit margin of 2,900%. I know you're gonna have to take away production costs and like how much you pay the employees and all that stuff, but there's no doubt they are making so much money because I think the development cost should be what covers all of that stuff. Anything extra is probably pure profit. I'm not asking them to put a $700 million budget on the game like Call of Duty does. But generally speaking, putting more money into something and allowing more time for it to cook means a better product. They could easily put another $50 million into development costs for any game they make and be assured that this money will be made back nearly tenfold. This franchise has been around for almost 30 years in the gaming department, and they always make so much money. Let's also not forget that these are just launch numbers from the first week. This game will very likely go on to sell over 10 million copies and possibly 15 million if it just matches the Legends Arceus sales numbers. I'm just kind of sad about all of this because I've been a lifelong Pokemon fan, I've bought every game, and I enjoy every game regardless. My first ever video game was Pokemon Blue version when it came out, and I look at the series as something that can be so much better than it currently is. So I ask myself, if the product is so bad and so low quality like everyone says it is, why do the games continue to sell? Well, it's pretty simple. It's because of people like me. I'm part of the problem. In a recent large survey of around 180,000 people in Japan that was conducted by GEM partners and published in Nikkei Entertainment's Oshikatsu MAP, it showed that the average age of a Pokemon player in this day and age is 32 years old. Most of us who buy these games are older. We cave into the nostalgia and we just want to detach, disconnect, and catch some Pokemon at the end of a long day at work. And this loops back to what I said in the beginning. If it ain't broke, they're not gonna fix it. Their profits are still very high, their investment is absurdly low, and their players still continue to come back despite whatever they throw out there. So why should they bother to go the extra mile? Well, I don't think this is going to be sustainable. Eventually, these 32-year-olds are going to age out of Pokemon. At least, I think they will. And honestly, making a really high-quality game with tons of positive publicity will just make for more new fans to come in and play and stay. It's pretty simple, but I think that's what it boils down to at the end of the day. We can talk about corporations being evil, that they don't care about their consumers, trying to go after their competition with lawsuits all we want. And don't get me wrong, all of that is bad. But I'm sitting here and I can guarantee you that, like myself, if you're watching this or typing a comment below to respond, you're using technology built by an evil corporation, you're functioning off of electricity supplied by an evil corporation, you're living in a house built by an evil corporation, and even eating food mostly produced by evil corporations. I don't agree with what they're doing. But don't let that get in the way of your fun or my fun, or at least trying to support the developers who are the ones who truly deserve some positivity for doing what they can under the conditions they've been subjected to working in. Anyways, that was a lot of rambling about economics and business and ideologies, but I think it's time to shift gears and talk about the actual game, because despite all of the previous things I said, I actually had quite a lot of fun with this game. The first thing I want to talk about, which has been a subject of inflammatory debate online, is the graphics. It's one of the main things I see roasted in a lot of online conversations. You'll see a lot of still screenshots of basically copied and pasted 2D windows and balconies over and over again throughout this entire city that the game takes place in. And that's true. Nobody can refute that. It seems a bit lazy, and it is. And honestly, it makes the city a bit more lifeless than it should be. And yet, when you play the game, you don't really notice it. Because what Legend ZA does is it does a pretty good job at diverting your attention away from what it doesn't want you to see, and more towards the things it wants you to focus on, which are the wild areas, the rooftops, and more importantly, the Pokemon, because that's what this game is all about. I'm not trying to ignore that issue, and trust me, I'm going to talk about it more later on. But from a pure performance standpoint, as a Switch 2 player, I can't really speak on the performance of this game on the Switch 1, it ran pretty flawlessly for me at what seemed to be 60 frames per second consistently with almost no drops whatsoever. There was like an occasional one if I teleported across the map and was like immediately loading into a zone. But other than that, like running around the city and walking around, doing the battles, all that stuff was very, very smooth. I also played mostly in handheld mode in bed or on the go, and even then it ran perfectly. I didn't even need to have it docked, so it's very well optimized for the Switch 2. Having said that, I'm not trained to notice big changes in graphics, and so from an average gamer's perspective, the game operated completely fine and I never had any crashes, glitches, or issues at all. In terms of the scope of the game, like I said earlier, the major focus is the wild areas and the Pokemon. Some of the wild areas themselves are actually nicely done and well designed. The vast majority, though, are just random cityscapes with Pokemon spawns dropped into them. The ones that did stand out are things like the graveyard with the ghost Pokemon and the construction site with the rock and steel types. Everything else was kind of generic and felt really weird. The big middle post-game area was also cool, but everything else, again, just felt weird. Narratively, I know it makes sense. They're trying to do this within the setting of the story and the scope of the game. I get it, but there's something just really jarring about a massive alpha Salamence just walking around the city. That just won't work in my mind. Also, having a random-ass icy snow area in the middle of the city makes no sense whatsoever. How is the climate being kept that way? Surely you can't just say, we have technology. I know they had to make the Pokemon variety fit in the game somehow, but again, the word weird is what comes to my mind. It does not fit. Continuing on about the scope. This entire game takes place within a single big circular city with random alleyways and streets. Without a map, you will 100% get lost, as everything looks very similar to each other, and once I unlocked all the teleport points, I basically never walked around the city anymore. It's a big waste of a city scope. And honestly, this is one of my major letdowns in the game overall. The original Lumiose city was fantastic, and we've definitely gotten a more watered down version of it. There are also only a handful of buildings you can actually go inside, which is insane to me. There's a few restaurants which are basically the same room copied 3 times over, and a couple of story destinations in addition to 2 dungeon-like areas, which are honestly the highlight of the game and a pretty real reference back to old Pokemon. There's even a museum in this game, which is like shockingly a great area to explore, and there's no reason for you to go there other than if you're running around the city. Why could they not do more of this? You clearly have the ability to create some actually really nice indoor areas, but the city is left as like a barren, outdoor sort of generic city that doesn't have like a fleshed out atmosphere. Had they done just a little bit more of the dungeon crawling aspect within buildings and underground areas like they did for these two, and then a couple of more buildings with just like randomness or fleshed out areas. Heck, we're used to having always like in a big city, the big market with like multiple floors. We didn't even get that in this one. There's a ton of skyscraper like buildings here. You could put one in there. This game had the potential to be incredible within a big city, and that was just lacking. Building on that last point, we can also talk about the structure of the game. The premise is very simple. Your job is, as a battler, to climb the ladder from Z to A. Each time you do a set number of battles, you get a challenger ticket, and then you battle an opponent to rank up. It's simple, but a tried and tested tournament-style system that a lot of people would love and get excited about. The problem is, it was so repetitive against generic trainers 95% of the time, and only your rank-up battle was a unique story-relevant trainer with a good design and a themed team. For story purposes, we also skip like 60% of the available ranks, which was kind of shocking, but I'd rather that than have them pad it with filler content devoid of any real quality. Effectively, these rank-up battles are your gym leaders in all but name. Each one of them comes with a trainer before them that's their right-hand man or woman that uses another alternate element, and that way you basically get 2 gym leaders for the price of 1. I honestly really enjoyed the rank-up battles, actually. Each one came with a story that introduced the characters and contributed to the main conflict of the game. We saw them all interlinked in subsequent story segments, which I don't recall being done this way in a Pokemon game before. Their personalities and designs all felt fairly unique, at least to me. A lot of people will say these characters look fairly generic, and I agree that there's an argument to be made for that as well, especially with anyone else outside the main cast, but personally I actually liked it and I can't really tell you why. This transitions me nicely into actually talking about the story of the game. Again, it takes place within a very limited setting, but honestly, I thought they did a pretty good job with what they had to work with in terms of their scope. They managed to create a sequel of sorts to X and Y, integrating some pretty major parts of the lore, resolving a nice plotline that features a rather famous certain 3,000-year meme, and adding in some past references such as Team Flare, while featuring a completely new cast otherwise. I don't think it was anything earth-shattering, and while the plot was fairly superficial and simple, it at least made sense and was coherent. I didn't hate it, which is a good thing, but it's not going to be anywhere near the top-tier stories overall, though by Pokemon standards, it was pretty good, I will say, but that's not saying much. I don't want to go into too many spoilers, though there aren't many, but let's just say the entire plot revolves around technology and Pokemon interference, as well as the integration of living of Pokemon and humans together within the same space. Overall, the power of friendship prevails, and everyone comes together to save the day. I don't think there was an actual evil faction in this game like we're used to in Pokemon games. It's more so dealing with the repercussions of the actions of their predecessors, and that was honestly kind of an interesting take that is uncommon for Pokemon. There may be some less than ethical and morally gray components to some of the characters which I did like, such as Team Rust being people who are basically loan sharks that prey upon people in debt in order to get them to undertake missions for the improvement of society instead. Kind of an odd angle to take, I will admit, especially it being directed at children, but maybe Pokemon does need to be slightly more adult-themed if its average audience age is 32. The one shining light I don't think I can really toss any criticism on is the music. I love the music in this game. It's actually incredible and so catchy. All our rank-up battle characters have their own theme song, and then they have their own in-battle theme song that's actually totally different. Like, the fact that we have an electro swing song in here is honestly insane. Traversing the city to some smooth, jazzy vibes is always fun, and even something as simple as Tarragon's garage theme using a sound effect of like the workshop screwdriver tool in the middle of it is a pretty nice touch. Canary's theme is also super fun and full of life and hype. Overall, a really enjoyable selection of musical pieces in this game that totally stood out to me. But alongside that, there really needs to be a gameplay component, and this is where I think I have to be a bit harsh. For the first time in as long as I can remember, a Pokemon game has attempted to shift away from the regular speed-based, turn-based combat system that Pokemon has always done, and Honestly, if there was one time where I wish they employed the if it ain't broke, don't fix it model, it's here. Sneaking up and doing initiation attacks in the real world is fine, though most of the time you just KO a Pokemon straight off the bat and it speeds up battles, which again is fine. My issue comes with the shit show that is just spamming attack-based moves. A lot of time, you and your enemy will be hitting each other at the same time, even if you one-shot them. You'll take some form of collateral damage, so it feels like a slugfest. I wasn't really able to find any role whatsoever for defensive or tactical play in this game at all, and while it does make things more quote-unquote difficult, it just means I'm spamming more heal items and revives in between battles than I'm doing anything else, honestly. They kind of promoted a dodge and like running away tactic during battles, and that kind of works for some of the AoEs, but most of the time it's just sloppy and it doesn't really work, and some of the attacks track you, so it's just like, what's the point? The physical versus special moves coming out quicker, but short range versus long charge up and long range hitting is also kind of annoying in the main game. PvP is another factor entirely, and I don't have enough experience with it to talk about that, but for balance, from a main game perspective, it was just annoying. This change also meant that glass cannons are basically rendered useless, because most of the time your opponent is going to have a variety of super effective attack moves that will likely one-shot you, and they're actually smart enough to use it here. I had a Kadabra on my team the entire game that I honestly never used simply because of this, while Pokemon like Gyarados, Tyranitar, and even Meganium shined because of superior bulk while being able to hit relatively hard. It's not the worst thing ever, and I'm glad they try new things, and I try not to criticize people heavily or blame them or attack them for trying new things because I think change is good, but they're going to need to really refine this a lot more to maintain an element of balance and keep me on board with it. The one thing that I actually did like about the battle system are the rogue mega battles. This feels somewhat like an attempt to have a proper raid boss battle, and it does absolutely destroy the dumb Dynamax battles we had in Sword and Shield and whatever their equivalent was in Scarlet and Violet, I forget. This is an excellent step in the right direction, and one I'll give them major props for. The enemies all had relatively unique movesets, and the battles were long enough for you to see it all, as well as their phases that they change and do different attacks in. It's still very basic and very shallow, and you're not really punished for not utilizing the features of the game until the very last battle in the post-game, but I genuinely wouldn't mind seeing them expand on this in the future since I think it's a great idea to have this type of battle in Pokemon. Picture this, in the mainline game, if you had to battle the legendary Pokemon like this and then capture them after that, even if it was guaranteed, even if it was in the main series and it was so different to the turn-based combat, I would actually be really happy with this because if they tuned the difficulty properly for it to be a nice challenge, it would be a pretty rewarding epic battle that ends in an earned capture instead of relying on RNG, low HP, sleep, all of that stuff at the end. I would like that. I think that would be great. Anyways, the last thing I'm going to talk about in this review is a massive gripe that I have, and that's the exploration and side quest system. Ever since the Genshinification of video games, everything has been about roaming a large world and collecting important objects, and the colorful screws system in this game is no different. It wouldn't have been bad if I didn't just absolutely hate the way the little platforming segments were structured. The exploration itself is pretty clunky. You have this weird glider double jump thing that doesn't unlock after the middle of a super annoyingly long tutorial, and coming off the traversal in Scarlet and Violet, this is a total step backwards from the features they had available previously. I know you're limited in what you can do in a city, but whatever happened to the bike feature we've always had in Pokemon, for example? And surely they could have come up with more clever puzzles or challenges to reward colorful screws instead of just scaffolding or randomly connected rooftops everywhere. This is another reason why further expanded indoor segments would have been a good idea. The side quests are absolutely atrocious, and they get like a -5 out of 10 from me in this game. There are 119 of them, and it's about 119 side quests of absolute dog shit. I don't normally use that as a description, but I legit can't think of a better name, and I can't think of a single one that's memorable in a good way, and I remember all of them as a painful chore that is as generic as can possibly be. Battle this trainer. Show me this Pokemon. Trade me this Pokemon. Show me this move. Or go talk to this person. And that's basically everything this boils down to. If you were to take the most generic JRPG side quest format and make 119 of them, this is basically what it is. They could remove all of them from the game, all of them, and absolutely nothing would be lost except like maybe 5 hours of game bloat that they don't even need to be here. They're probably designed to just pad the game and make it longer, but they suck. They need to do better here, and there's no two ways about it. Anyways, that's about it. I've definitely talked for a long time. Feel free to let me know what you guys think about Legends ZA in the comments below, whether you got it, whether you haven't got it, played it, or haven't played it. I would love to hear some other opinions. Overall, I actually had a lot of fun in the game. I know there's like a lot of positives and negatives that are going on. It's got a lot of shortcomings, but again, Pokemon is just like a guilty pleasure of mine. I always have fun with it, regardless of what it is. Having said that, this is a review, and if I'm going to judge it on like a pass or fail scale, this does not pass. I have a pretty firm $1 an hour rule. This game took me 40 hours to beat. Not all of those 40 hours were quality, and I don't think this game is technically worth buying in its current format, especially if you're going to compare it to some fantastic games, not even from the past, but things that have come out this year, like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Expedition 33, Hades 2. I would do those first. But if you like Pokemon and you enjoy the format and you have a Switch 2, this is a pretty solid, like, I don't know, 6 out of 10 game. It's like average, slightly above average. You can turn off your brain, catch monsters kind of deal. But that's just kind of my opinion on the topic. I hope you guys like this video, and I'll see you guys in another video pretty soon. Peace.